Been another day of violence in Bangladesh where police have again fired tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters. A prominent activist was also arrested, sparking a big reaction. We'll have more on that in a moment. I want you to have a look at these pictures first of all, though. Groups of young men armed with wooden batons filmed attacking students at Dhaka's.
Now we have reaction from some of the journalists here. This is what they had to say.
We have one demand only, that is journalists should be able to work safely. And also note, those who attacked the journalists, we have their pictures. We want the Home Ministry to identify these attackers so we can perform our professional duties safely.
We are journalists, also unsafe. That's why we are gathering here. Journalists are beaten here and there, and we want free mass media in Bangladesh.
The protest for safer road and safety for journalists is something we want together. The reason we want this is because in the last few days, the peaceful protests that have been taking place gradually took a very violent turn.
This is a major concern for the media community in Bangladesh right now. They want protection and security and justice for those who attack them. Some of them said, we know who these culprits are, we have their pictures, the government needs to bring them to justice. Now we also know a renowned photographer, Dr. Shahidul Alam. He's been detained by the detective police that's been revealed now today. Despite everything that's going on in the city, the media community is very concerned and feel threatened. They're unwilling to cover any protests right now because they feel personally insecure to go and cover any kind of protest or any kind of demonstration in the city right now.
Here's Rahila now to talk us through more on this one. Now, we had huge response on this one when we were on air yesterday. Has it carried on since then?
We're still getting so much in terms of response from all sorts of platforms, Twitter, Facebook especially, Kamal. But we haven't seen that many people on the streets this time around. But social media is still being flooded with information. And we've been getting hundreds of messages sent directly to us. Dominating that conversation, though, is about the Bangladeshi photojournalist and social activist Shahidul Alam. Now, he was arrested at his home in Dhaka by more than 20 police officers. And we have been recently informed that he will be held in detention for the next 7 days. He was initially arrested a few hours after he gave a live interview to AlJazeera and posted some of those videos on Facebook about the protests. Now, people are using the hashtag Free Shahidul Alam and We Want Justice on Facebook, Twitter and Telegram as they demand his release. And at least 5 journalists have been attacked, which is another indication of how hard it can be to be a journalist in Bangladesh, which is ranked 146 out of 180 countries in the World Press Freedom Index. Now, that said, the country's media sector is growing, and a quick look at the most recent Global Digital Report will tell you that Bangladesh has almost 82 million internet users. Most are logging on with mobile devices, and almost 20% are active on social media, and that's increasing all the time as data plans become more available. And as for traditional media, state-run TV is still the main go-to for people getting their news and also their information. Now, if it is safe to do so, please keep these messages coming in. Also, all of your videos, use the hashtag AJNewsGrid, or you can simply message me directly. I'm at Rahila Mohammed.
Thank you, Rahila. On Skype from Vienna now, Scott Griffin with us, Deputy Director of the International Press Institute. First of all, thanks for joining us, Scott. I'm just looking at our live stream on Facebook at the moment. We've got about 2,500 viewers, live viewers at the moment, which is not as much as yesterday, but still it's a lot. And we're just getting the feeling that a lot of people are coming to us and other international outlets for their news on Bangladesh, which I guess tells us a lot about how the media either operates or is able to operate in Bangladesh.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's the case. And I want to begin sort of by briefly mentioning this case of yesterday, the Shahidul Alam, the journalist who was arrested shortly after speaking with AlJazeera. And I think what's important to recognize about this case is that it's not an isolated incident. I mean, in our view, it's clearly an attempt to stifle viewpoints that the government sees as critical. But the law that was used to arrest Mr. Alam is something called the Information and Communications Technology Act. And in fact, there's a pattern of the government using this law, and in particular what's known as Section 57, basically to arrest scores of journalists over the past few years, almost all of them for similar reasons, which are usually tarnishing the image of the state, defaming the state, spreading propaganda about the state, which is exactly the accusation that's being made against Mr. Alam. And we've seen some really farcical cases in recent years. I mean, last year there was a case in which a journalist spread a picture of a dead goat on social media, and the goat had been given by a minister to sort of some poor people in a particular constituency. And this was sort of a critical take on what the minister had done, and this journalist was eventually arrested and tossed in jail. And the ironic thing is that the government has already promised actually to get rid of this law and put something else in place, and that something else, unfortunately, seems to be problematic on its own. So this is really a pattern that we see. It's not something unique.
Okay, it's not something unique, but has it always been this way? I guess I'm talking going back in time. Has Bangladesh always struggled with this?
I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that press freedom in Bangladesh has never been, the best in the world. However, we have seen in recent years a definite decline, and a lot of it has to do with the legal atmosphere. Basically, the government using arbitrarily certain laws like this Information and Communications Technology Act to go after journalists who are critical of the government. I mean, we've seen journalists who are facing actually billions of dollars worth of lawsuits for libel and defamation. Again, a number of journalists who have been targeted under this particular act. And at the same time, we've also seen, and this is just as big of a concern, is physical attacks against journalists, and that has been accelerating in recent weeks. If you want, correspondents from major newspapers like the Daily Star or Potamalo have been attacked by what appears to be government supporters. And I think that we can say that we don't see right now from the Bangladesh government a strong enough reaction against these type of attacks that makes it clear to everyone that violence against journalists is not acceptable.
Do you envisage any of this might change? The reason I say this is when a spotlight is shone this strongly, and by international community as well, it's not a good look for the Bangladeshi government, obviously. Do you think there's enough here to prompt some change? Because I would also note there's an election coming up later this year.
It depends how sustainable the spotlight is, essentially. I mean, what I was mentioning about this particular law, there's been a spotlight on it now for about a year. And the government was now forced to turn around and say that it's going to get rid of it and put something else in its place. Now, what has happened in that time is that a new bill has been proposed, which is called the Digital Security Act, which looks like it's going to, be a new start, but in fact it's not. In fact, many of the provisions that are being used to jail journalists now in Bangladesh are just being sprinkled in different spots in this law. Some of the jail sentences are being slightly reduced, but it's still much worse than, even if you look at the Bangladesh criminal code. So this is actually, it depends how long and how sustained the pressure on the government is. If it's just a few days, they may find a way to say, okay, to appease the criticism long enough for the international community to look away, and then when the attention has been drawn away a little bit, to find ways to bring some of these things back. So it's really a question of keeping the pressure on for a long period of time.
Scott Griffin from the International Press Institute is in Vienna. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
As I said to Scott, this is all taking place in an election year in Bangladesh. Parliamentary elections due in December, or by December. And just a few months ago, Faisal Mahmood wrote this for AlJazeera.com, questioning how political imprisonments were already turning the election into a sham. In fact, one of his interviewees said, here it is, "It's a government and a political party which believe they are not accountable to anyone. It's a dangerous sign in a democracy." Is Bangladesh moving towards a one-party state? It's in the features section at AlJazeera.com. And maybe you just want to get in touch with us as well. Remember, the hashtag is AJ Newsgrid. 3,000 or so of you on the live stream at the moment, and plenty of comments are coming through. A lot of you pointing out as well that 9 days of protests, but in fact, who was it who said it? Let me just have a little check here. Sohail on Facebook said, "We only want justice and safe roads." And so much of this started out just because of the issue of road safety and has really escalated. And as I said, in an election year, that's going to be quite crucial. Also, a point made by Hussein, who has said Shahidul Alam's only crime was to give an interview about what was happening. Now he's sitting in jail. Where is the rest of the world? At AJ English on Twitter, if you want to reply to our thread there with the hashtag AJ Newsgrid, facebook.com/AlJazeera for the live stream. As I said, it's always good to have you watching and commenting there. WhatsApp and Telegram +974 501 111 449.